If you Google Harley's flagship engine, you often find contradicting information. Some say that the engine is unreliable and full of faults. They say that the engine is sumping, transfers oil and tends to overheating. Others say the exact opposite and claim that it is one of the best and most reliable engines Harley has ever produced. So what is really up with Harley-Davidson's Milwaukee 8 models? Are they scrap metal or engineering masterpieces? In this video we will find out. I studied the technical details for each model and created an overview of typical flaws and strengths of different model years so that you can decide for your own. So stay tuned, leave a like and support my channel. Let's start with a brief model overview. The first bikes to be equipped with the Milwaukee 8 engine were the 2017 touring models. The first version of the engine had 107 cubic inch and was installed in 4 models: the Road King, the Road Glide, the Street Glide as well as the Ultra Limited. The 107 generates approximately 90 horsepower and 111 foot-pounds of torque. Only the CVO models had the 114 cubic inch engine already in place. 2017 was also the last year where the Dyna and Softail models were still delivered with the twin cam engine. If you're interested in twin cam models, check out my video in the link above. In model year 2018, the company released the new Softail chassis. The first Milwaukee 8 Softails came mostly with the 107 cubic inch engine, however it was now optional to equip some models with the 114 engine as well. In 2018 also all CVO models were upgraded to 117 cubic inches, which now generated 104 horsepower and 126 foot-pounds of torque. A very important upgrade was introduced in model year 2020. Some early model Milwaukee 8 models suffered from weak oil pump performance, which created a couple of issues. The new oil pump solved some issues, but I'll talk about this in the next section in more detail. In 2021, another important change was introduced. The company downgraded the hydraulic clutch from all touring models and replaced it with the old school cable clutch. At first glance, this change might appear as a step for cost reduction, but the rationale behind that move is another issue. Previous touring models suffered oil transfer to the primary, which occurred on models with hydraulic clutches. In 2022, Harley released the Lowrider ST. The bike became an instant fan favorite for several reasons. With the club-style fairing, a dual brake setup as well as the hard saddlebags, the bike was a lighter, viable alternative to the touring models. Secondly, the bike was fitted with the 117 cubic inch engine, which was previously exclusive for CVO models. Finally, in 2024, Harley-Davidson completely redesigned the Street Glide as well as the Road Glide. Among other changes, both models come now equipped with the 117 cubic inch engine. New fairings, new saddlebags, electronic gauges, new handlebar controls, as well as a completely new electronic package with riding modes and other gadgets. The new engine has different cylinder heads, a reshaped combustion chamber which enhances low RPM torque and improves fuel economy. The CVO line was upgraded to a stunning 121 cubic inches, creating 139 foot-pounds of torque. Before we start talking about the engine reliability, let's do a brief engine comparison. Note that there can be slight performance differences across models, even for similar engine displacements. To ensure comparability, I compare the specs mainly for Street Glides and Road Glides. First, we can see that the stock 107 has already a decent torque of around 111 foot-pounds. The 114 engine adds about 10% more torque at a lower RPM. However, horsepower remains the same. Torque gain from 114 to 117 is negligible and occurs at a much higher RPM. On the other hand, the 117 engine generates almost 10% more horsepower compared to the 114. I think that the 114 engine offers the most value per dollar in the first generation of the Milwaukee 8. It offers a lot of torque at low RPMs and many models are already equipped with the 114 engine. This means if you consider buying a used bike, you should find pretty interesting offers here. On the other hand, those among us who prefer to drive at higher revs should opt for the 117 cubic inch engine. Also, I wouldn't completely write off the 107 either. If you don't want to go on the racetrack or drive with 120 miles per hour on the motorway, then the 107 engine is more than suitable for most purposes. And in case you need more power, you find the 107s pretty cheap and the money that you save you can invest in tuning. In addition, some models are only available with the 107 engine, such as the Softail Deluxe or the Sport Glide. The new 2024 117 cubic inch engine outperforms all previous engines and generates unbelievable 130 foot-pounds of torque. In the CVO models the torque is even higher, but it also pumps up the compression of the engine. Of course it is up to debate whether you need that much power or not. Nevertheless, I have to say that it's amazing how powerful the Milwaukee 8 has become. What do you think? Do we need that much power, or may smaller engines be sufficient? Leave a comment below, since I'm really curious to know what you think. Before talking about the engine issues, I believe that it's important to highlight that only a small fraction of all engines is affected by these issues. It is much more likely that you'll never see any of those issues on your bike. The last thing that I want to create is a negativity bias where you might get the impression that Harley engines are completely unreliable. They are not. In fact, the Milwaukee 8 is one of the most reliable motorcycle engines ever produced today and a worthy successor to the twin cam. Yes, I said it, don't beat me up for it, and I'll illustrate my point throughout this video. But first let's look at some of the issues. They are rare, but they still exist and they cause a bit of headache to some of the buyers. So let's jump right into it. There are plenty of videos on YouTube which explain the sumping issue in detail. In fact, I could fill a whole video talking about it as well, but I don't think it's necessary to make another tech talk. I'll try to keep it short and simple while focusing on the essentials. The sumping issue mostly occurs on Milwaukee 8 Harleys from 2017 to 2019. Touring as well as softail models are affected by it likewise. So what exactly is the sumping problem? Simply put, the engine oil accumulates where it shouldn't. Normally after lubrication the oil should return to the oil tank, but it doesn't. Instead, the oil fills up the crankcase and the cam gear cases, which can lead to a series of symptoms. Too much oil in the crank and cam case increases the friction, which leads to a power loss and excessive heat. Furthermore, too little oil is circulating through the engine since the oil pump is too busy dealing with the oil in the bottom end, which again increases heat even more. Besides that, sumping can lead to oil leaks, especially in head breathers, increased oil consumption, increased lifter wear, as well as increased engine wear in general. So now what's causing the sumping problem? The main reason is an inadequate oil pump in the model years up to 2019. The oil pump doesn't manage to transport the excess oil from the crankcase, which leads to an excess accumulation of oil in the bottom end. The most reliable way to solve the sumping problem is to replace the oil pump for the affected model years. There are different oil pumps from Harley as well as Fueling and S&S. I've had good experience with Fueling, but according to the Harley forums the other two appear to be just fine. This problem has been mostly observed on early Milwaukee 8 touring models with hydraulic clutches for the model years 2017 to 2019. Softail models are not affected by this problem. So what exactly is the issue? Basically, some bikes, when ridden for a long time, can transfer oil from the transmission to the primary. Keep in mind that Harley motorcycles, unlike many other motorbikes, do not have just one oil circuit for lubricating the engine and the transmission simultaneously, but rather 3 separate oil tanks. One for the engine, one for the transmission and one for the primary drive. During operations, the transmission builds up pressure, which leads to a pressure difference between the transmission and the primary case chambers. This means that there is less pressure in the primary and more pressure in the transmission. Since both oil chambers are connected by a hollow main shaft, oil can pass through the shaft from one oil chamber to another. The pressure difference causes an oil transfer through the main shaft to the primary. Just imagine opening an empty bottle underwater. The bottle will be filled up with water immediately. It's not quite as drastic with the Milwaukee 8, but you get the picture. Historically, this design is well established and has worked reliably so far. Overall, Harley transmissions are pretty solid and normally a small amount of oil transfer is not an issue, as the primary oil and the transmission oil are identical. However, the oil transfer can become a problem if large quantities of oil are transferred unnoticed over a longer period of time. In the worst case scenario, this can dry out the gearbox and cause damage. This happens rather rarely, but it is still worth noting, especially if you consider buying a used touring model from 2017 to 2019. Now, what are the solutions for this problem? First, Harley tried to solve the oil transfer issue by installing an oil deflector, also known as a slinger, in model year 2020. The slinger helped a large fraction of bikes to get rid of this problem, but it didn't solve it completely. So Harley introduced another kit, which is basically a vent hose for the primary. The second upgrade costs a few dollars and takes about 1 hour of work to install. The vent hose improves the ventilation and reduces the pressure difference between the primary and transmission. I have posted the parts numbers in the description below. In 2021, Harley introduced another solution and replaced the hydraulic clutch by a cable clutch on all touring and CVO models, so the problem was finally solved. So is it all bad with the Milwaukee 8 and we should look for another bike? Definitely not. Only a small fraction of all motorbikes had these issues, and after 2020 most vehicles were mostly reliable. Even if you observe some of the issues today, they are pretty simple fixes. The German motorcycle magazine carried out an endurance test over 33,000 miles with the 114 cubic inch Heritage Classic. The Harley not only made it to the top 10, but it took the first place in the list of the most reliable motorbikes. You heard that right, even ahead of Honda and BMW. They even took the 2019 version, which still was affected by the sumping issue. The magazine wrote, "This is an unbreakable, reliable long-distance runner." So overall, the Milwaukee 8 is a solid and reliable engine. Now let's take a look at the pros and cons. The first and biggest advantage of the engine is its power. It is hands down the most powerful big twin Harley has ever produced. Not only is it powerful, but it is also reliable. Even with the aforementioned issues, the engine mastered long endurance tests and stood the test of time. Some may not agree with me on this one, but I think the engine sounds awesome. Especially if you install a long duration cam on the bike, it sounds similar to a jacked up twin cam. Furthermore, the bike is pretty easy to tune. The effort for tuning the Milwaukee 8 is much smaller compared to the twin cam. Last but not least, some tech freaks will like all the new electronic gadgets which the new platform provides. On the downside, I have to mention the early model issues. I want to repeat though that those issues are easy to solve and shouldn't hold you back if you like the engine otherwise. The bikes are still pretty costly here in Europe. Even the used bikes are rather price stable. This is good news for owners, but not as good for potential buyers. Furthermore, one could argue that the Milwaukee 8 doesn't really need all that much power. It is nice on paper, but it remains questionable whether it is really necessary in practice. And although I like the engine a lot, it's not my favorite Harley engine because it lacks some old school features which the previous models had. Sometimes I enjoy the inefficiency of older engines, the carburetor smell and the excess vibration. The Milwaukee 8 has unfortunately none of it. Do you agree with my analysis? Please leave a comment in the section below, since I'm really curious to know what you think. Thank you for listening and see you next time.